We built the most advanced combat drones in the galaxy, but the moment they faced a human, our sensors glitched, our AI panicked, and I realized we had made a catastrophic mistake. So, there I was, sitting in my observation pod 300 meters above the testing ground, sipping what you humans would call coffee, except ours doesn't taste like burnt dirt. My name is Krell, and I'm what the Galactic Defense Coalition calls a combat systems analyst. Fancy title for someone who watches things blow up and writes reports about it, right? Now, before you get all excited, let me paint you a picture of just how routine this particular morning was supposed to be. We were running standard certification tests on our new Mark 7 combat drones. Beautiful machines, really sleek, efficient, powered by quantum processors that could calculate 1,000 tactical scenarios per second. These things had taken down Krellian war beasts, outmaneuvered Zenthari fighter craft, and made our previous generation of drones look like children's toys. The testing protocol was simple, almost boring. Release the drones in waves of increasing difficulty, let them engage a target, record the data, adjust the algorithms, repeat until either the target surrenders or the drones achieve complete tactical superiority. Usually took about 40 minutes, maybe an hour if the test pilot was particularly skilled. And then they told me the target was human. I actually laughed, out loud, nearly spilled my not coffee all over my datapad. A human, one of those squishy, slow-reflexed primates from that absurdly heavy death world, the same species that needed chairs with back support because their own spines couldn't handle sitting for too long. Oh, this was going to be over in 10 minutes, tops. I'd be back in my quarters before lunch filing the shortest combat report of my career. My colleague then, a four-armed Pollux who took everything way too seriously, gave me that look. You know the one. The look that says you're being an idiot, but I'm too professional to say it out loud. He adjusted his 3 optical sensors and pulled up the human's file on the holographic display. Lieutenant Zara Torres, he read, his translator giving his voice that annoyingly calm quality. 28 standard years old, human, Earth origin, specialization, electronic warfare and close quarters combat systems. Electronic warfare, I repeated, letting the sarcasm drip from every syllable, against quantum encrypted military drones. This should be entertaining. The testing arena below us was a 2-kilometer square of variable terrain, hills, valleys, structures that could be materialized or dissolved as needed. Right now, it was set to urban warfare configuration Gamma, which meant ruined buildings, narrow corridors, plenty of places to hide. Not that hiding would help her for long. Our drones had thermal imaging, electromagnetic scanning, motion prediction algorithms, and about 16 other tracking systems I couldn't even pronounce correctly. The lighting dimmed, indicating the test was about to begin. I leaned forward, zooming my display to the center of the arena where they'd drop the human. Standard protocol, give the target 60 seconds to orient themselves, then release the first wave, 3 drones. Difficulty level 2 out of 10. Child's play, really. We'd seen Galactic Marine recruits, fresh out of basic training, handle level 2 without breaking a sweat, and then she materialized. Lieutenant Zara Torres dropped into the arena with the standard equipment loadout. 1 pulse rifle, 2 sidearms, a combat knife that looked absolutely ridiculous compared to galactic standard blades, and what appeared to be some kind of portable electronic suite strapped to her back. She was small, even by human standards maybe 1.6 meters tall, wearing matte black armor that looked well primitive, no energy shielding, no gravitational dampeners, just plates of some composite material. Her helmet had a dark visor, so I couldn't see her face, but her body language was loose, relaxed, too relaxed. She doesn't look concerned, Van observed. She doesn't know what she's up against, I replied, pulling up the drone deployment controls. Let's not keep her waiting. I initiated the first wave. 3 Mark 7 combat drones descended from their holding positions, their anti-gravity drives humming with that distinctive high-pitched whine. They were beautiful in motion. I have to admit, each one was roughly spherical, about a meter in diameter, covered in that adaptive armor plating that shifted colors to match the environment. Mounted on each drone, 2 plasma cannons, 1 kinetic railgun, and a particle beam emitter. Overkill for a single human, sure, but we were testing the drones, not trying to be fair. The drones formed a standard triangular attack pattern, approaching from 3 different vectors, textbook tactics. The center drone would draw fire while the 2 flanking units maneuvered for kill shots. Our AI had run this simulation about 10 million times, success rate 99.7%. Torres stood perfectly still in the center of what used to be a building's courtyard, her rifle held loosely in a low ready position. She tilted her head slightly, and I swear I could hear her laugh through the audio feed, even though she hadn't activated her comms yet. Wave 1 deployed, I announced, recording the timestamp. Drones achieving optimal firing positions in 5, 4, 3, 2. That's when things stopped being routine. The human moved. The drones locked on simultaneously, their targeting lasers painting 3 red dots on Torres's chest plate. Standard operating procedure: illuminate the target, confirm lock, fire. Takes maybe 0.3 seconds. Our processors are fast, you understand, really fast. Torres was faster. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She didn't even raise her rifle. Instead, she tapped something on her wrist and every single display in my observation pod went absolutely insane. What the? I stared at the screens. The drone's telemetry was corrupted, showing impossible readings. Temperature sensors claimed the arena had suddenly dropped to absolute zero. Motion trackers detected 17,000 phantom targets. The thermic spectrum looked like someone had thrown a paint bomb at it. Countermeasures deployed, Ven said, way too calmly for what we were witnessing. She is broadcasting a full-spectrum jamming signal. That's impossible, I snapped. Our encryption is quantum level. She can't just... But she could. And she had. And while I was busy being confused, she'd already moved 20 meters to the left, rolled behind a broken wall and done something with that portable unit on her back. The center drone, suddenly blind to everything except basic visual input, fired 3 plasma bolts into empty air. Torres popped up from behind cover. And here's where it got interesting. She didn't shoot the confused center drone. No, that would make sense. Instead, she aimed at the left flanking drone, the one that still had partial sensor function, and fired a 3-round burst directly into its central processor core. How did she know where the core was? These drones were classified military hardware. Their schematics weren't exactly public knowledge. The left drone spiraled down, trailing smoke, and crashed into the rubble with a very expensive crunching sound. That's 30,000 credits of advanced military hardware turned into scrap metal in under 4 seconds. Okay, I muttered, adjusting the difficulty parameters. Lucky shot. Let's see her handle this. The remaining 2 drones adapted. See, that's what makes Mark 7 special. They learn. The AI recognized the jamming signature and started filtering it out, recalibrating sensors, compensating for the interference. Within 6 seconds, they had partial target lock again. They split up, flanking wide, using the ruins for cover just like they were programmed to do. The right drone went high, ascending to roof level. The center drone went low, hugging the ground. Classic pincer movement. No way out. Torres crouched behind her wall, checking something on her wrist display. Her head swiveled left, then right, tracking both drones even though, according to our sensors, she shouldn't have been able to see them through the interference in the buildings. How is she tracking them? Ven asked, his optical sensors narrowing in that way that meant he was actually worried. Audio, maybe? I suggested. The anti-grav drives make noise. In an urban combat zone, with echo interference. No, something else. The right drone, positioned on the rooftop, acquired firing solution first. It charged its plasma cannon, the telltale wine building to discharge level, 0.4 seconds until fire. The human couldn't possibly react in time. Torres threw herself sideways, not backward into cover but sideways, into the open, rolling across broken concrete. The plasma bolt vaporized the wall where she'd been crouching 0.3 seconds earlier. Before the drone could recalculate, she'd come up on one knee, rifle braced against her shoulder, and fired a sustained burst at the building support column beneath the drone's position. I blinked. She missed by 3 meters. What is she? The column exploded. Turns out those pulse rifles, primitive as they looked, packed enough kinetic force to shatter reinforced structural materials. The entire rooftop section collapsed, and the drone, caught in the cascade of falling debris, got smashed between 2 chunks of concrete the size of transport vehicles. 2 drones down, 1 remaining. This is not normal, Ven said quietly. It's luck, I insisted, but my hands were already moving, reprogramming the last drone's tactical parameters. Maximum aggression, no more cautious maneuvering, just close and eliminate. The center drone erupted from ground cover, all weapons hot, moving at maximum combat speed. It closed the distance to Torres in under 2 seconds, firing continuously. Plasma and kinetic rounds chewing through the terrain. The human actually ran, sprinting through the ruins while explosions tracked her path. She vaulted over a collapsed wall, landed in a slide, came up running. The drone predicted her trajectory, adjusted aim, fired where she was going to be, not where she was. Torres changed direction mid-stride, and I mean changed direction. Like physics decided to take a break. She planted her foot and cut left at an angle that should have torn every ligament in her leg. The plasma bolt passed so close I saw the edge of her armor glow red from the heat. She spun, still moving, rifle coming up in one fluid motion, and fired a single shot. One shot. It hit the drone's right side plasma cannon at the exact microsecond it was charging for another blast. The overload was instantaneous. The plasma containment failed. The energy backfed into the power core, and the entire drone detonated in a blue-white fireball that registered 0.8 on my seismic sensors. Silence fell over the testing arena. Torres stood in the settling smoke and dust, rifle lowered, breathing hard but standing. 3 combat drones. 3 piles of burning wreckage. Elapsed time 2 minutes, 47 seconds. I stared at my displays, double-checking the recordings to make sure I hadn't hallucinated the entire engagement. Krell, Ven said softly. Perhaps we should reconsider the difficulty progression. No, I heard myself say. No, I want to know what just happened. Deploy wave 2. 6 drones. Difficulty level 5. That's aggressive 4. Deploy them. Down in the arena, Torres looked up at my observation pod. She couldn't see me, obviously, but somehow it felt like she was staring directly at me. Then she raised one hand, and made a gesture that I later learned meant bring it on. I was happy to oblige. 6 drones descended into the arena like angry mechanical wasps, and I was feeling vindictive. Level 5 difficulty meant enhanced target prediction algorithms, coordinated pack tactics, and weapon systems that could punch through starship hull plating. This wasn't a test anymore. This was me being petty because a human had just embarrassed 3 generations of galactic military engineer. Ven pulled up Torres's physiological data on a secondary screen. Heart rate elevated but steady. Respiratory function normal. Core temperature slightly raised. Standard exertion levels for combat activity. Nothing that suggested she was panicking or even particularly stressed. She is treating this like a training exercise, Van observed. Good, I muttered. Let's see how she handles actual pressure. The 6 drones split into 2 groups of 3, forming what we called a Talon formation. Group Alpha would engage directly, keeping the target busy, while Group Beta would circle around and strike from an unexpected angle. We'd used this tactic against Xanthari special forces. It worked. It always worked. Torres reloaded her rifle with swift, practiced motions, then did something that made absolutely no sense. She ran toward Group Alpha, not away, not to cover, but directly at 3 armed military drones that were actively trying to kill her. Error in the human's tactical processing. Then suggested. More likely panic, I said. Fight or flight response. Humans are known for making irrational decisions under stress. Except she wasn't being irrational. As Group Alpha opened fire, Torres dropped into a slide, going under the initial plasma volley, her momentum carrying her across the broken ground. She fired her rifle one-handed while sliding, not at the drones but at a rusted fuel canister half buried in the rubble. The explosion wasn't huge, but it didn't need to be. The shockwave and shrapnel cloud disrupted Group Alpha's sensor arrays and forced them to scatter their formation. Torres used those 3 seconds of confusion to close the distance to the nearest drone, somehow getting inside its minimum targeting radius. That's not possible, I said flatly. The collision avoidance system should have. Torres jumped. Actually jumped, using a piece of broken wall as a springboard, and grabbed onto the drone's underside. The drone's AI immediately initiated evasive maneuvers, spinning, diving, trying to shake her off. She held on with one hand, pulled that ridiculous combat knife with the other and jammed it into the drone's ventilation port. A knife, I said, my voice climbing higher than I intended. She's attacking a combat drone with a knife. The blade must have severed something critical because the drone started smoking, its anti-gravity drive failing. Torres rode it down like some kind of deranged rodeo performer, jumped clear at the last second and hit the ground rolling. The drone crashed and exploded behind her. 5 drones left. Her kinesthetic awareness is beyond standard parameters, Ven said, his analytical voice cutting through my shock. The way she moved, anticipated the drone's evasion pattern, maintained grip while under multi-directional G-forces. Krell, I need to show you something. He pulled up a comparison chart. Human physical capabilities versus galactic standard. I'd seen it before. Humans were weaker, slower, more fragile than most spacefaring species. Everyone knew that. Now factor in Earth's gravity, then continued. 1.0 standard G, compared to galactic average of 0.67 G. So they're heavier. I know. Denser bones, stronger muscles to compensate. Basic evolutionary adaptation. No, you're not understanding. Humans don't just adapt to higher gravity. They train in it. Every single day of their lives they're essentially wearing a full-body weight suit. Their reflexes, spatial awareness, movement patterns, all of it is calibrated for an environment that's fighting them constantly. Down in the arena, Torres was proving his point. Group Beta had completed their flanking maneuver and was coming in from behind. 4 drones now, attacking from 2 directions. Torres spun, her movements almost too fast to track properly, and I finally understood what Ven was trying to tell me. She wasn't moving fast by human standards, she was moving at normal human combat speed, but in the arena's 0.7 G environment, which was standard for most galactic facilities, she was operating at roughly 1.4 times her natural capabilities. Everything she did, every motion, every reaction, was amplified by the physics of being in a lighter gravity well than her body was designed for. The drones couldn't predict her movements because their algorithms were built on galactic standard physics. They were trying to calculate trajectories for a target that was simultaneously heavier, more momentum-driven, and more explosive in acceleration than anything in their training data. Torres dodged left, but because of the momentum her mass carried in lower gravity, she traveled twice as far as the drones predicted. She jumped to clear an obstacle, and the reduced gravity turned it into a 3-meter leap that looked completely casual. She changed direction by planting her foot and pushing off with force calculated for Earth gravity, which in this environment meant she could practically dance through the air. It's not fair, I whispered, watching her tear through the drone formation like they were stationary targets. She's got a built-in advantage. She's also doing something else, Ven said, highlighting her movement pattern. Watch her eyes. Watch where she looks. I zoomed in on her helmet cam feed. Her head never stopped moving, her eyes constantly tracking, processing, calculating, but she wasn't looking at the drones. She was looking at the environment, at every surface, every angle, every piece of cover and concealment. Environmental combat, Ven explained. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a death world filled with predators. They don't just fight opponents. They use everything around them as a weapon. As if to prove his point, Torres grabbed a length of cable from the rubble, looped it around a support beam and used it to swing herself up and over a drone's firing arc. While airborne, she fired her sidearm, 3 quick shots that punched through another drone's optical sensor cluster. The drone, suddenly blind, fired wildly and hit one of its own squad mates. 4 drones left. No, 3. The friendly fire incident had taken out number 2. The remaining drones tried to adapt. Their machine learning protocols kicked into overdrive, analyzing her patterns, attempting to build predictive models. I could see it happening in the data streams, thousands of calculations per second, the AI desperately trying to understand what it was fighting. But here's the thing about machine learning. It needs consistency to work. It needs patterns. It needs the target to behave in ways that can be quantified and predicted. Torres didn't fight like a program. She fought like a human, which meant she was creative, unpredictable, and apparently completely willing to do absolutely insane things if she thought they might work. Case in point, she threw her rifle at a drone, just chucked it like a spear. The drone's threat assessment protocols didn't even register it as an attack because who throws their primary weapon? The rifle hit the drone's sensor array. The drone flinched, its AI confused about whether to track the rifle or the human. And in that microsecond of hesitation, Torres closed the distance and shot it with her sidearm at point-blank range. 2 drones left and they were retreating, actually retreating. Their survival protocols overriding attack directives. Torres let them go, standing in the center of the arena, surrounded by burning wreckage and her own heavy breathing. She retrieved her rifle, checked it for damage, reloaded both sidearms with calm efficiency. I sat back in my chair, my not coffee long forgotten and probably cold. Deploy Wave 3, I said quietly. Krell, perhaps we should. Deploy Wave 3, maximum difficulty. All safeties off. I need to see how far this goes. Ven hesitated. His optical sensors focused on me. You're not testing the drones anymore. You're testing her. Yes, I admitted. Yes, I am. Because if one human can do this, then we need to know what an army of them could do. The implications hung in the air between us, heavy and uncomfortable. Down in the arena, Torres looked up at the observation pod again and nodded once, like she knew exactly what was coming and was ready for it. I activated the final deployment sequence and tried not to think about how badly I'd underestimated her species. 12 drones materialized around the arena perimeter. Not descended, materialized. We'd activated the emergency deployment protocols, the ones reserved for actual warfare situations. Level 10 difficulty adaptive combat AI with 0 restrictions. Full weapon authorization including the heavy ordnance we weren't supposed to use in testing scenarios. Then made a sound that his species only makes when deeply disturbed. Krell. This is excessive. If she dies in this test, the diplomatic ramifications. She won't die, I said with absolutely no evidence to support that claim. Look at her. Torres stood in the center of the arena, and I realized she was smiling. I could see it on the edge of her helmet cam feed. The corner of her mouth turned up in something between amusement and anticipation. She'd dropped her empty rifle, drawn both sidearms and was checking her electronic warfare suite one last time. The 12 drones didn't waste time with formation tactics or coordinated approaches. They just attacked, all of them, simultaneously, from every direction. The arena erupted into absolute chaos. Plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, particle beams, all converging on Torres's position with enough firepower to level a small building. The ground where she'd been standing simply ceased to exist, vaporized into superheated gas and molten slag. But Torres wasn't there anymore. She'd moved, before the first shot fired, her combat instincts reading the drone's targeting telemetry somehow, predicting the kill zone and getting out. She sprinted along the edge of the blast radius, so close that her armor was scorching from the ambient heat, and fired both sidearms at the nearest drone. The shots went wide, deliberately wide. They hit the wall behind the drone, ricocheted at calculated angles and struck 2 other drones from behind where their armor was weakest. She's using geometry, Ven breathed, calculating ballistic trajectories in her head while running at full combat speed. Humans can't do that, I said automatically. Apparently this one can. 3 drones repositioned to box her in. Torres holstered one sidearm, tapped her wrist control and her jamming suite went into overdrive. Every screen in my observation pod turned into visual noise. I was flying blind, relying only on the arena's external cameras that weren't connected to the combat network. Through the static and interference I saw Torres do something that made my blood run cold. She stopped running, just stopped right in the middle of 3 converging attack vectors and closed her eyes. What is she doing? I demanded. Has she given up? Is she? Torres moved. Not away from the attacks, but between them, threading through the incoming fire with movement so precise it looked choreographed. A plasma bolt passed centimeters from her head. She leaned into it, using the heat wash to mask her thermal signature. A kinetic round screamed past her shoulder and she twisted, letting it pass through the space where her torso had been a microsecond earlier. She was reading the battlefield without looking at it. Sound, air pressure changes, electromagnetic signatures, the faint vibration of weapons charging. She was processing all of it through senses I didn't even know humans possessed. Proprioception, Ven said, pulling up more data. Spatial awareness. Humans evolved to track prey through dense forests, to fight predators in conditions with limited visibility. They don't need to see everything. They sense it. Torres opened her eyes and 6 drones exploded simultaneously. I rewound the recording, played it back at quarter speed and finally saw what happened. While moving through that impossible dance between weapons fire, she'd been planting charges. Tiny magnetic explosives pulled from her equipment harness, slapped onto drones as she passed them, proximity triggered and linked to a remote detonator. She'd turned herself into bait, drawn the drones into close pursuit, and used their own tactical aggression against them. 6 drones left. Torres was out of ammunition, low on equipment, and according to her biometrics, running on adrenaline and sheer stubborn determination. Her heart rate was at 170, respiration, elevated, core temperature pushing dangerous levels. The remaining drones recognized this. Their AI calculated that she was exhausted, compromised, vulnerable. They moved in for the kill, tightening the circle, preparing for synchronized termination. Torres pulled out her combat knife again, that same ridiculous blade that had no business being on a modern battlefield. She held it in a reverse grip, crouched low and waited. The drones struck. What happened next took 4.3 seconds, and I've watched the recording maybe 100 times since then. I still don't fully understand how she survived it. Torres moved through the drone formation like water, like something liquid and impossible to pin down. She used the first drone as a springboard, vaulting over it while dragging her knife across its sensor array. Blind, it fired at where she'd been and hit the drone behind it. She landed on a second drone's top surface, rode it like she'd done before, steered it by shifting her weight so it crashed into a third drone. Both went down in a tangle of metal and sparking electronics. 4 left. She was falling now 20 meters up and dropping fast. One drone moved to intercept from below, weapons charging for an easy kill. Torres twisted in midair, threw her knife with perfect accuracy, and the blade punched straight through the drone's central processor. It died instantly, and she landed on top of its falling chassis, using it to break her fall. 3 drones remaining. Torres had no weapons, no equipment, nothing but her armor and her absolutely unreasonable refusal to lose. The drones knew this. Victory was assured. They closed in with textbook precision. Torres grabbed a piece of rebar from the rubble, charged the nearest drone and beat it to death with a metal bar. I'm not being poetic. She literally bludgeoned a 30,000 credit military drone into non-functional scrap using a piece of construction material and what I can only describe as therapeutic violence. The last 2 drones, and I swear this is in their actual diagnostic logs, hesitated. Their AI had reached the limits of its programming. Nothing in their tactical database covered what to do when the target is armed with improvised weapons and apparently fueled by pure spite. Torres didn't hesitate. She threw the rebar like a javelin, spearing one drone through its anti-gravity generator. It dropped like a stone. The final drone tried to retreat, actually tried to flee. But Torres grabbed a broken plasma cannon from one of the earlier wrecks, manually overrode the safety protocols and fired it at point-blank range despite the fact that it could have exploded in her hands. The last drone disintegrated in a blue-white flash. Silence fell over the testing arena. Torres stood among the smoking wreckage of 12 military combat drones, breathing hard, covered in scorch marks and coolant fluid, and probably her own blood, though she hadn't reported any injuries. Total elapsed time for the final engagement 11 minutes, 16 seconds. I pulled up the damage assessment. 12 drones. Total loss. 460,000 credits of military hardware reduced to recyclable materials, and 1 human still standing, still combat capable, giving my observation pod what I was pretty sure was an obscene gesture. Ben was already running calculations, his optical sensors flickering rapidly the way they did when he was processing something disturbing. Krell, I have compiled the full engagement statistics. Go ahead, I said, my voice sounding hollow even to myself. 21 combat drones deployed, 21 total losses, 0 human casualties, ammunition expenditure 247 rounds, equipment used, standard loadout plus environmental improvisation, most concerning factor. He paused, and I'd never heard him pause before. She was holding back. What? Analysis of her movement patterns, reaction times and tactical decisions suggest she was operating at approximately 70% of maximum capability. She was pacing herself, treating this as a training exercise, not a life or death scenario. I stared at the data, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. Pull up human military records, active combat personnel. How many soldiers like Torres do they have? Ben worked in silence for a moment. Difficult to determine exact numbers. Earth's military forces are decentralized across multiple nations and organizations. Conservative estimate based on available data. 15 million active personnel with comparable training. Potential reserve forces. Approximately 100 million with basic combat capability. 100 million. 100 million humans, all of them evolved on a death world with higher gravity, more aggressive predators and environmental conditions that made most galactic planets look like vacation resorts, all of them capable of the kind of creative, unpredictable, absolutely unhinged combat tactics we just witnessed. We need to file a report, I said quietly. Recommending what? I thought about that for a long moment, watching Torres finally sit down on a pile of rubble, pulling off her helmet to reveal sweat-soaked hair and a face that was grinning like she'd just won a prize instead of fighting for her life. Recommending that humanity be classified as a Category 5 combat species. Recommending that all first contact military protocols be revised immediately. Recommending that under no circumstances should anyone anywhere ever underestimate them again. Then nodded slowly. The Coalition Council will find this disturbing. Good, I said. They should be disturbed. Because here's what terrifies me then. This wasn't a trained assassin. This wasn't one of their special forces operators or elite commandos. This was a standard lieutenant. Above average, sure, but not exceptional by human standards. She told me herself when I interviewed her after. There are thousands of humans better than her. I pulled up the final image from the test. Torres, sitting in the ruins drinking water from a canteen. Looking tired but satisfied. Just another day at the office for her. Just another training exercise. They don't fight like machines, I continued. They don't fight like logic dictates they should. They fight like the universe personally offended them and they're determined to even the score. They turn everything into a weapon, including themselves. They take damage that should kill them and keep going through sheer stubbornness. And worst of all, they think this is normal. They think everyone fights this way. Then was quiet for a long time. Finally he asked, "What do we do with this information?" "We share it," I said. "Every military academy, every tactical institute, every combat training facility in the coalition needs to see this recording, because if we ever end up on the wrong side of humanity, if we ever make them an enemy instead of an ally, we need to understand exactly what that means." I closed the files, saved the recordings, and started writing my report. Somewhere in the back of my mind I was already revising every assumption I'd ever made about combat doctrine, tactical superiority, and the nature of warfare itself, because I'd learned something important today, something that would probably keep me awake for many nights to come. Humans don't just survive on death worlds, they thrive there, they evolve there, they turn adversity into advantage and obstacles into opportunities, and when you put them in a slightly less deadly environment than the one they're designed for, they don't just compete, they dominate. Lieutenant Zara Torres had taught me that lesson, cost me 500,000 credits in destroyed hardware, but I'd learned it thoroughly. Never, ever underestimate a human, especially not when they're smiling.